to Grid Live Pre-Race. The NASCAR Cup Series is back at Richmond, and teams have two tire compounds to use. Jackson Todd from 36xracing.com is with me. I'm Joe Samaniego. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network. Link in the video description. And of course, you could do super chat, buy me a coffee, are also appreciated. We'll thank you on the air. Jackson, it's been a while since we've been talking about NASCAR. It's been a while since we've had you on the show. One of the big things, the Olympic break, is coming to the end. NASCAR 2 weeks off. We saw some pretty big news during the Olympic break. Spire and Corey LaJoyce are splitting away. And Ready Global, they're eyeing the NASCAR Cup Series, potentially Spire Motorsports. A lot of folks connecting the dots there. 2025 Cup Series playoffs will likely include Talladega in the round of 8. So the winner of that will be in the championship floor if that turns out to be true. And yesterday, we learned that Bristol Motor Speedway will host the Speedway Classic Major League Baseball game. I believe is the Cincinnati Reds and the Atlanta Braves. Which news was the biggest shock and could have the biggest impact?
Yeah, it's been quite the few weeks off here. I would say the shocking news would be the MLB game taking place at Bristol Motor Speedway. I think that feels a little bit out of left field, if you will. But I think that's a really cool deal. I think it's going to be good. I mean, it's good for NASCAR. It's like showing that another major sport is interested in one of your venues, and I think that it'll just be a cool event for MLB and for NASCAR. But in terms of the biggest impact, that has to be Talladega looking like it's moving to the round of 8. I'm not thrilled at the move, but I mean, you got to have a super speedway in the playoffs. It's unfortunate it's the round of 8. I guess it makes sense when you look at the weather calendar and how that stuff breaks down. I've been a very big defender of the elimination format. I think it's really cool. I think it's really entertaining. But putting Talladega this close to the end really feels like it's pushing that entertainment line just a little bit too far. But also, if it's the only super speedway in the playoffs, then in theory, by the time you get to that point, you've already kind of narrowed down your field. So yeah, I mean, I think those are kind of the big two that stick out to me. The Spire news, the Corey LaJoy, Andretti. I think those are kind of things that have been building. The baseball game at Bristol, Talladega in the round of 8. Those are the two highlights to take out of the Olympic break.
I know, like you said with Talladega, I keep thinking, okay, you're only going to have 8 drivers in the playoffs. Will it be a little less crazy compared to when we have it in the second round because you have a little less playoff contenders?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly. It's just going to turn into. I mean, can't say for sure, but I would think it's going to the team dynamics we've kind of seen slowly ramping up at super speedways the last several years. I think those are just going to be amplified. If Ryan Blaney is still in the playoffs, but Joey Logano and Austin Cindric are not, well, that's just a Penske pack of 3 that you might as well treat as one car. I think that would introduce interesting storylines, but I think the round of 8, there's not enough cars. I think the round of 12 is a good place for that race and that dynamic to be.
And the manufacturers too, we've seen how they'll try to work together. The best example of what you said was when Stewart-Haas Racing just dominated that year, Talladega, with their 4 cars up front. I believe it was Eric Almirola that got the win that day. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Talladega. And of course, all the news, Grid Tonight, every Wednesday. Everybody will be there to discuss the latest news. So as the schedule becomes confirmed, we'll have that. Now, let's switch over to Richmond this weekend. We have 8 past winners in this field, with Kyle Busch leading with 6 wins. Denny Hamlin, second with 5 wins. Truex with 3. Kyle Larson and Brad Keselowski with 2 wins each. All the other drivers, 1 win apiece. That includes Chris Buescher. Now, one of the things, Chris Buescher, Kyle Busch, they're the 2 drivers that have won here at Richmond, but are winless this year. All the other drivers have won a race this year. I got to ask you, Kyle Busch, Chris Buescher, Martin Truex Jr. too, he's also winless. Out of those drivers, which one do you think will end their winless streak?
I I I guess Truex would be one to put up there, but it's not quite the winless streak that like Kyle Busch is on. I think unfortunately Kyle Busch's winless streak is going to continue. This doesn't seem like the weekend for him to break through. I think Chris Buescher, he hasn't had in the spring. He finished. I mean, he got a top 10 in the spring. Back at Iowa, he finished 18th. Those aren't golden results. I think it's going to be kind of one of the regulars that wins this week. I don't think it's going to be any of those big winless streaks that get split up. I think coming out of the break, you're going to get one of the textbook winners, a Larson, a Hamlin, and I guess you can throw Truex in that batch too. But I don't think it'll be any surprise winless streak breaking this week.
I gotta agree with you. I think it's going to be one of the drivers that have won already this year. The two easy favorites are Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin. But I'm keeping my eye on Christopher Bell. Surprisingly, this morning he is number one on DraftKings. Of course, that's prior to qualifying. So, of course, qualifying will be coming up later. Kyle Busch, I gotta say, I think out of all the past winners,
Oh, I can't hear you, unfortunately.
I gotta say with Kyle Busch, I just don't see him being a contender to win this race. So I just don't
I
see
think this is a
Kyle.
me problem.
Just one of those deals, the internet. So we'll let Jackson come on back in when that is all situated. Let's go to the chat room, see what's going on right there from Adam. Love the new layout. Unfortunately, this new layout does now move me up a little bit, so that's covering my face. But thank you so much, Adam. And one of the big things, of course, I have to say this: when it comes to Kyle Busch, he is struggling. A lot of rumors going around about his future with Richard Childress Racing. I'm just thrilled to see what's going to happen with the next few weeks with Kyle Busch and Richard Childress Racing, because I think it's going to be really exciting to see how everything plays out. Can that team find something, get a good finish? Because at the times where they have races where it looks like they're going to have a good finish, next thing you know, they're out of the race, something out of their control, or just bad luck. Sometimes something goes wrong with the car. They got caught up in the crash. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that turns out. And then when it comes to Chris Buescher, I got to say, Jackson, I think Chris Buescher looks like he could win. One of the big things, though, your 36xracing.com, been known for following drivers, especially that 100 start mark. Overall, which drivers around 100 starts do you think will have a strong race or be a winning contender at Richmond?
The big ones I would say is, someone that has passed 100 starts recently that's been on a great run has been Christopher Bell. He's certainly, I kind of use the 100 start thing as when someone's going to arrive, and Christopher Bell has certainly hit his arrival point. I think he's someone to keep an eye on this weekend. He uh, won at New Hampshire. He got fourth at Iowa. In the spring Richmond race, he finished sixth. Those are all great indicator results to me. But in terms of somebody that's maybe not as established in the winning department, I think you can take a look around at the guys like Justin Haley, Chase Briscoe, even Todd Gilliland. I don't know if they're going to be winning contenders this week, but keep an eye on them to have good days. They didn't have particularly great runs at Richmond in the spring. Sorry, I reset everything and I lost my notes here. Justin Haley, he got 13th at Iowa. That's worth noting. Todd Gilliland, 12th at Iowa. So Haley and Gilliland would be the two that I would keep an eye on from that batch. You also have somebody like Ty Gibbs, who's not yet to 100 starts. He seemed to struggle the spring race at Richmond. So I don't think this is going to be the week for Ty Gibbs to break through. It's kind of like I said earlier. I think it's going to kind of be the usual suspects this week.
I would have to say, I think the usual suspects as well, and especially since this race has not really been one where we've seen a whole lot going on when it comes to the action on the track. Now, one big change that's going to be on the track This weekend, the tires. 2 sets of tires. Team will be allotted 6 sets of prime tires and 2 sets of the option tires. The option tires, much softer, more grip, but they're going to wear out a lot faster. NASCAR will not mandate when the teams use their sets. We've heard people talk about in the All Star race, let the teams decide when to use them. North Wilkesboro, we didn't see a whole lot of difference when it came to the tires. This track, it has become one where passing has been a little bit of a struggle, but last time we were here and we started in damp conditions, 3, 4 wide all over the place, brought a lot of people excitement. I have to ask, do you anticipate the option tire to play a big factor in the race?
I think regardless of the effectiveness of the tire in terms of wear or speed, regardless of how that actually plays out, the tire will have an impact in this race because the teams will be trying to figure out what that effectiveness, what that wear looks like. So this week, regardless of how it performs, yes, it will play a factor in the race. That might just be stage one and stage two. If we get to stage three and everyone's like already has it figured out that it does work this way, doesn't work that way, it will play a factor this week. Going forward, I guess we'd have to test again. I'm very interested to see how practice this afternoon goes. I think that'll give us maybe one answer the full picture in terms of race strategy and how do you use an option tire. I mean, in a race where you have scheduled cautions that you know are coming. Two, you might need to get points at those cautions. I saw a NASCAR promotional video that Steve Letarte mentioned, like even like the lucky dog battle and things like where you're going to get lapped, how that could impact things. And then of course, like this is an oval. We're not used to seeing this type of racing on the oval. And then like at North Wilkesboro, like it's kind of playing around with a little bit. I think it's the all-star race, whereas this is introducing it like this is your push to the playoffs. This is the final little batch of races to make or break your season. So it is going to have an impact. What impact? I don't know. We'll see, but it will have an impact.
And you bring up 2 big points. It's an oval. I feel when we've seen IndyCar use a option tire in the ovals, you don't see a whole lot of difference. I always want to see NASCAR try this on a road course, Watkins Glen. A couple years ago when we had wet conditions in Watkins Glen and people were switching over from the wets to the softs, and we saw the difference. That's where I think you could see it. And then the stage breaks. I don't anticipate, depending on how the practice goes and what the notes show, I think everyone's going to stay on the regular tires. Maybe you might have somebody before the stage break if we have a late caution. Okay, we're middle of the pack. Let's throw in the option tires and see where it goes. Can we make a lot of room? I just wonder, will everyone just save their option tires to the very end for the late restarts and potential overtimes?
Yeah, it is gonna be interesting because I think they have, is it 6 sets of the prime tires this week and then 2 of the option tire for the race. And I think about the teams like that are kind of known for flipping things around. I think about like the 47 car. I feel like they're flipping things around often. Like the 6 is often flipping things around, and then Paul Wolf on this 22 is always willing to flip things around, and it seems to work out for them pretty often when they do. It's going to be interesting to see that side combined with the drivers that can manage the tires the best, like the Bristol race in the spring. Like Denny Hamlin was an ace there, so how do you combine that skill with the right strategy call?
Yeah, I think Bristol got tire wear, tire management on everyone's radar, it seems, this year, because it seems like NASCAR, hey, let's try the option tire here. The Richmond race the last time when everyone was on wet tires at the start, and we just saw plenty of action going on. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all shapes up. And of course, I know we encourage everyone again, be sure to visit Jackson's website, 36xracing.com. Link in the video description. One interesting pattern. So, looking at the favorites, you have essentially Joe Gibbs Toyotas and Rick Hendrick Chevrolets. Followed by that, you then have essentially the Fords of Logano, Keselowski, Busher, Blaney. They round out the top 10 picks. Ford, they were pretty strong before the Olympic break. Some races slipped out their win. Busher, he has one here as well too. And we have an odd pattern since Darlington. Ford has won every other race. Does that pattern continue, which means Ford will be in victory lane?
I don't know. I'm interested to see how the momentum shifts coming out of the Olympic break, because I feel like going into the break, the big story was that like Ford started the year not in the best state, but over the course of the summer, like Ford has won every other race. Like Ford suddenly flipped it around. And a lot of that included good runs at, I mean, like Blaney's win in Iowa, obviously, I mean, sticks out as something that would be relevant here. Um, I, at the Richmond Spring Race, top Ford finisher, Logano finished second in that. So I think a Ford could win this week. I think if a Ford wins this week, then I mean, the doubts were still around, but they would be shut down at that point, I think. And a Ford, I mean, Ryan Blaney, he had a fantastic summer. I don't have my numbers pulled up right now, but he had a great summer stretch. And if that can continue coming out of the break, because I would think this is kind of where you're starting your playoff run. And if the Fords show up today and start a playoff run, then like, yeah, they're for real.
Yeah, Ford, they're just been looking pretty good. And like you said, when you look at Ryan Blaney, his last few races, Iowa, of course, he won. Loudon, 25th, but then top 10 every race since then. He could be a contender to win. Logano, I think he almost seems to come off lately as a little bit of a sleeper, where in the past we would say Logano has to be a favorite to win. I think just because the way his season is, a lot of people just sort of dismiss him as okay, it's going to be the Chevy, it's going to be the Toyota, maybe Ryan Blaney. But I think Logano has to be a driver to watch for. I think he could go win. And Chris Buescher, oh, how much he would love to have a win. Get himself into playoffs, join his teammate, his boss, Brad Keselowski, and to have both cars in the playoff for RFK Racing. That'll be a huge boost for him in the momentum. Just so interesting that from the start of the year where we were talking about what's going on with Ford, they're winless, are they in trouble? To now, they essentially have made it where nobody has won two in a row because it's going to be every other race Ford winning since Darlington, which that was a race where that could have easily been Busher. That could have easily been Reddick had those two not gotten together. I just feel that win had really just started to show Ford we're on the right track and they are just continuing on. Now, one of the things, of course, the playoffs is the big thing. This is essentially we're getting down to it, as you said, when it comes to the playoffs. This is we have done 22 races out of the 26. So essentially, I always like to tease Ben about this. We're not going to get more race winners than playoff spots this year. But let's play a little bit of in and out, starting with Martin Truex Jr. He is 108 points above the cut line. I assume it's safe to assume he'll be in the top 16 unless he
Uh,
has a disaster day and
yeah,
everybody
I mean,
behind.
yeah, he has really had quite the collapse over the course of the summer. He started the year really strong, and he's just been like slowly falling down the standings. And I mean, all that being said, he's plus 108. That would be pretty hard to drop down. So he's going to be in, but they need to be racing like they're not. They have to find whatever they lost and get it turned back around. So in, but like in.
Yeah, I agree. It would be like a catastrophe if he was to like somehow be close to the border. Ty Gibbs, 42 points above the cut line. Do you think he's going to be in or out?
I'm I'm giving him an in. It's a soft in, but I'm giving him an in. I think it's just gonna he he again started the year really hot. I feel like as Ford decided to show up, that's kind of when Truex and Gibbs they kind of seem to be two that kind of suffered down the lineup from that. But that being said, like Gibbs can still put together solid days. I don't think it's a really big concern. Like 42 points also is like a pretty decent gap, unless there is like multiple winners that show up out of nowhere. But I don't think that'll
Yeah, it would take what Busher to like Gibbs to finish last, Busher to essentially finish near the win, Chastain to win, and Bubba have a good day. That's the only way, really, mathematically, but that's a lot for him to go wrong, find himself out. But let's talk about the driver of the 17, who is 17 points above the cut line, Chris Busher. He's won here before. Will he be in or out?
I think he's in. He's yeah, plus 17 looks tight, but I think you're going to some decent tracks for him. I think he's not just like a good super speedway racer, but like a wise super speedway racer. We can kind of make that distinction. I think he'll put together some good days here in the next few weeks. I don't think it's a big concern for Busher. I think he's good. It's kind of the same thing as Truex. It's just about like you got to flip your momentum here. Even if you do make the playoffs, like if you're sitting down here, if you're still questioning if you can make it, you have to turn something around to actually make it have a meaningful appearance in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think with Busher, he's in. He's been close. I don't see him having a rough race. I feel he's a driver that he puts together good races. Sometimes bad luck will occur here or there, but he's not a driver like Kyle Larson where he's winning or he finds himself crashing out too frequently, in my opinion. I think Chris Busher safely going to be in, but now this one I'm really curious about. Ross Chastain, 7 points above the cut line, just 7 away from Bubba Wallace. Is Chastain in or out?
I'm leaning out. Which feels crazy to say, but the fact if you would have told me preseason that Daniel Suarez has a win and Ross Chastain is looking like someone on the bubble on the outside, that wouldn't have felt right. That's just kind of the situation Trackhouse finds itself in, and really, I mean, when we talk about Chevy having success, that's kind of just Hendrick really at the end of the day, and Trackhouse is not having a good season, and I think Ross is going to slip out here at the end. I feel like the momentum is not going in the right direction for him. We'll talk about Bubba in a second, but his momentum seems to be going in the right direction, and you have good tracks for him coming up. Where Chastain, it seems to be going the other way.
I have to agree. I think Ross Chastain's in trouble this weekend, especially Bubba Wallace. At 23-11, they should be fast at Richmond. I think he's going to get around Ross Chastain this weekend and claim that 16th spot in the standing. And overall, Trackhouse Racing, it just seems like there might be some rumors going around about potential changes behind the scenes. I'm wondering if there's something going on that is distracting them, where they just not 100% compared to the past 2 years. I know last year, it was okay year. The year before, phenomenal. It just seems like they're continuing to slide backwards. Really curious if there's some stuff behind the scenes. I have to ask you this follow-up question as we look at the top 20. Todd Gillian, 20th. He's 118 points out. He's most likely going to be out unless he wins a race. But considering he is outperforming Michael McDowell, which I believe McDowell is 21st in the points, but 30 plus points, I believe, behind. How surprised are you with Todd's performance this year? And do you think he really is generally outperforming Michael McDowell? Or do you think Michael McDowell might be having a little bit of that lull since we know he is on his way out next year?
I think I am not surprised by Todd's performance, but like in a good way. Like he's progressing like exactly as expected. We mentioned the 100 start thing. He's about to hit 100. He's hitting a stride right now, and I'll be curious to see next season if everything goes according to plan. And we saw kind of front row making some progress. It's kind of maybe seemed like it's slightly plateaued this year. Maybe it's just kind of a circumstance, the way a few things fall. But Todd Gilliland getting to victory lane next year would be not a huge. I mean, I'm talking about front row here, so I'm cautious to say, but like a Todd Gilliland win next year is definitely in the cards. And he's put up some strong performances this season. It just they just need to keep doing what they're doing. Really, they're moving in the right direction.
Keep doing what they're doing. The super speedways can't count them out either, so that could be a potential this year. And we still have Daytona. He could be a wild card if he wins Daytona and gets himself into playoffs. Really curious to see how this was all going to shape up. And of course, the playoffs, it's going to be a lot of fun. The last race of the year, the Sun 500. So still a lot of racing, a lot of tracks to determine who gets in. Let's determine who we think is going to win the race with Pick a Winner. So busy doing all the graphics and everything up there, I forgot to do an updated Pick a Winner graphic. But I can tell you, Matthew Bro still leads at 34 points. Top 10, the lowest score is Isha at 15 points. I believe you are in the top 10 as well. So, and I'm just barely in the top 10 right now. So when it comes to the NASCAR Cup Series, who do you think is going to win the Cookout 400 at Richmond?
I mentioned him earlier. I am going with Christopher Bell. I mentioned the wins already, but he had that great from his Coke 600 win to his win at New Hampshire. He had 3 top 10 finishes in between there. I mean, if you exclude the crash at Nashville and the crash out in Chicago, he's been on a great run of some really strong days, including a 4th place at Iowa, a 6th place at Richmond in the spring. Those are all the things I want to look for. We talked about, the usual suspects being up there this week. And I think this is just going to be one of those weeks where Christopher Bell shows up and gets a win. It's not, a big flashy win necessarily, but I think it's his turn. He's due up again.
He leads the DraftKings Sportsbooks currently. This is, of course, before the practice and the qualifying, subject to change. I'm going to go with his teammate, Denny Hamlin. I just think he's going to come out of this break full speed ahead, race everyone really hard, take the win. I don't think he's going to have the kind of performance where he could just dominate the day, but I think he can at least be strong up front all day. The big thing, no mistakes. In the chat room, pick a winner. Going with the same person I picked, Denny Hamlin as well. So be really interesting to see how it all shapes up. And of course, Cookout 400 starting pretty late tomorrow on Sunday. So no grid live wrap up. Instead, grid encore. Ben and Brandon, they're going to recap the NASCAR Cup Series race along with the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series and Arco West races on Grid Encore Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Grid Network. And we encourage everyone to subscribe to the Grid Network right here. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs. And of course, we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up this next few weeks. More racing coming back next weekend. Plenty of racing. So we're very excited. And thank you for tuning in. For Jackson Todd at 36xracing.com, I'm Joe Samaniego. You all take care and enjoy the races.